funding now, the changing standards that are there, might threaten your domains where there hasn't been traditionally apprenticeship programs. And these new standards that get created that could potentially come into these marketplaces and potentially threaten your future business or your existing business as it comes under the framework standard. And I want to take a moment, because part of what I do is I look to make sure that everything is connected. And what I mean by that is, when you run your programs, how many times is it that you get a situation where something goes wrong, but it was nobody's fault? You know, you go around each person in your organisation, something's gone wrong, there's been a complaint, sign-ups haven't been made, whatever it might be, apprentices haven't been recruited, and it's not happened. A new contract comes along. You get the contract, you get the tender, it sits there, you put it on the side, say, well done, big pat on the back to everybody, we now can deliver this contract. 2 months later, it's still sitting on the desk, it's not being delivered. And part of that problem, that process, is that everybody has done their job within the definition of their job. And what they haven't done is actually looked at how the piece of work, winning that tender by the big development people, then transfers into the business development, transfers into delivery, turns into the management of those processes. And as a consequence of that, it sits there and it remains undone. People, where things go wrong in businesses, very often isn't with a person or within a person's role, it's as it transfers from one role to another role. As soon as you make that transition, it falls between the cracks. And that's fundamentally what it's all about. And that's what I spend my time doing. And in this particular instance, I'm sure I'm going to trip over the speaker at some point, so camera's out. Yeah, so what I spend my time doing is actually helping organisations to connect themselves up properly, that when they win a new tender or they have a new project, something that takes them away from what they normally do, then I then look at how we can make those transitions. So effectively, when people say, what do I do for a living? I'm a cat wrangler. You know, because without being rude, have you ever tried to herd cats, get all the cats to run in the same direction? Fiercely independent, strong-willed, strong-minded individuals. Look around the room, look to the person next to you, that's you guys. And that's what I do. But I'm also an agent for change, so my job is to really kind of drill down into what is it we can do to facilitate and make these change happen. And then when I'm not doing that, I'm actually putting bids together and writing bids. I wanted to give you a context. And really, it's possibly, I was going to skip, but I just stopped because I had a conversation on the way during the break, just to take us a moment to get everybody on the same page. Most people who are training providers are on ROTA, the Registered Training Organisation. For those of you that are awarding bodies, as we just heard from Andy, that he wants to get on to become an apprenticeship assessment organisation, and there is a register of apprenticeship assessment organisations. Right now, most of you are going through the hell of ROTAP, and that's where the typo is, opposed to looking for the typo on the page, is that there are actually 3 different pre-qualification questionnaires within that process. One to be an employer, one to be a supplier or subcontractor, and one, which they call main, which is where you then go on to actually go on to be a deliverer for not apprenticeship levy, but for people who fall outside of apprenticeship levy. And then those people are lucky enough that they get to do another 6 questions and put a financial finance spreadsheet together, and they have to complete an ITT process as well. So I just did that one for context, and when these come out I will be taking care of 1 or 2 of these typos. But going back to my theme of everything connected, what I tried to do was say, if this is going to work, we need to connect up everything. You've heard from Enroller. We've got the systems for engagement and actually advertising to bring apprenticeships through the process. We've heard from Andy, who's an awarding body that connects into this process. We've got our traditional problem of picking up with employers, and we've got the whole process of delivering training. And then there's the endpoint assessment, the digital accounts, we've now got the tax office, and we've got the SFA. It is a veritable moving feast of connections. So there is absolutely loads of places where this can go. And in short, if you start with a levy employer, quick question, how much does a levy employer with a £3 million payroll bill pay in tax?
3%?
No, 0. Because they get the allowance and therefore that puts them down at 0. So somebody who's got a £3 million payroll actually pays nothing and it builds upwards from there. And that's kind of the thinking. What I want you to do is take your heads out of the space you're in. If you're an awarding body, that's great. Stop thinking like an awarding body for a minute. think like a provider, think like an employer. If you're a training provider, stop thinking like a training provider, think like an employer. And what's it going to do? What is their attitude? What's the way it's going to work? I'm not going to take you through the whole diagram. You can play with that to your heart's content afterwards. Should have IP'd it, shouldn't I, really? Then there's the non-levy stuff, and it's slightly different. And that's the process if you're working with smaller organisations that come under that threshold. And there's a slightly different mix of processes. You might have prime colleges coming into that mix. And it's still, you still get the whole process between awarding organisations and endpoint assessment organisations. So I wanted to go to where the employer's response would be. Now, to do that, I wanted to look at the motivation of the employers, because we tend to look at the world through our own perceptions of what we understand it. And I want to just take a step back and say, who are we going to be servicing as training providers, as awarding organisations? And we're going to have employers who are existing internal apprenticeship providers themselves. They already have their own infrastructure, they already deliver their own apprenticeships, and for them it's going to be business as usual. There are others which are already, other employers who already use apprenticeship providers, training providers, to actually do the delivery. So for them, there is going to be a chance that they're going to start to look at how they might do things differently. And then you're going to have what I've been terming as the newly interested. And by that is, have you ever noticed how nothing has value until you have to pay for it? Now, here's the thing. I'm a bit tight. So the second I pay for something, I don't want just the product. I want the product, and I want blood, sweat and tears. I want personal service and the whole thing that actually goes with it. As soon as I am paying for something, my mindset changes. Employers, historically, for a lot of training providers, have been motivated by different things. They're motivated by the fact they get the age grant. Ooh, 10 people on an apprenticeship, £15,000, thank you very much. Sometimes they're motivated because it's the right thing to do. Oh yeah, we ought to have one of them for staff morale. Somebody says it's part of our CSR policy, we'll do that. Other employers are looking at it quite genuinely, that they want to make a meaningful difference. But the reasons for getting into apprenticeships isn't always clear. Their motivations aren't always clear. Now, when you pay for something, and learners, we talked about learners, and there was a conversation piece, earlier, where you said the learners started, they're full-time, they're very busy, and you're absolutely right. The problem that you're facing with your learners, and Chanel can actually handle this one for you because it's an age-old problem, is everybody, when you start learning, you do so with the best of intentions, and we assume that we are going to have the time to do it. Then real world kicks in, and then urgent things, disasters, emergencies, family problems, the pet got run over, always interfere with the important, and urgent will always push out important every single time. And the problem is when we decide to do something, you give a job and somebody say, how long is that going to take you? And you go, 2 weeks. When people used to tell me 2 weeks, I got so fed up of 2 weeks not actually being the right answer, because in 2 weeks' time I went back and said, where is it? And it's not there. When somebody said 2 weeks, I gave them 4. And still, when you then give them 4, they decide to use all 4 weeks and still not get the job done. So it's one of those things. Urgent pushes out important. It's not important to them because they haven't paid. It has no value. As soon as you're getting an employer to pay something, that qualification now has value. They've invested in that return, and therefore they will want to see that return pay for itself. And just like now that employers are now paying tax, well, as they pay their tax, they're going to be like, I want it back. Now some employers will be just disinterested, and it'll be just another tax. It'll be okay, it'll just write it off, it's another tax, it's another 0.5 percentage point on what we already pay on our payroll, and do nothing further. But there will be those that actually want to set up a collaborative approach, and these are the ones that really, I suppose, most training providers are looking for, collaborative approach to develop an apprenticeship programme for their organisations, and they will be involved. All of a sudden, you won't be sitting in a review by yourself, you'll be sitting in your review and the manager will be in the meeting because they will want to be seeing that that learning is being put forward and done. And this is the headspace of the employer. They will want to be getting a return on that money they have spent. However, there will be some that decide to use it as an opportunity for revenue generation. Some will be employers who decide to set up and deliver their own apprenticeships, and there will be endpoint assessment organisations which facilitate that. They already do. A lot of awarding bodies already do these sort of things. They have employer services, and what they do is they go into a training provider saying, show me what you do, They look at what they do and they go, right, that meets that standard of an existing standard. Go, that meets that, that meets that, that meets that, that meets that. Carry on as you are now, and we can certify that award, or you only have to add professional discussion, and you've now done it internally using your internal trainers. Thank you. So that fundamentally is an opportunity for them, but that will compete with us. That will compete with training providers in order to actually do that. So will an employer do that? It takes time, it takes investment, and it takes effort with infrastructure. But it is a possibility that that is what we are competing with. That will potentially be the minds of the employers you talk to as you talk to them. So really, it's just about understanding what's their response. Employers are going to be your biggest opportunity, and I'll get to that because I'm going to leave you with that thought in a little. We've got some problems though. What are the barriers? And a big thing that we're going to find with employers now is employers have a lack of knowledge. It's been said, not going to harp on it. In my job, I get to ask lots of questions, and the good news is I get to ask lots of questions, and normally it exposes where something's not working as it should be. It gets to be fun. I get to enjoy that. I get to ask all the difficult questions, put my finger on the really painful bits in an organisation, the things you don't want me to know, or rather you don't want Ofsted to know or anybody else to know. And my job is to go and put the finger on it first, identify it, wiggle it around a bit, see how badly it hurts, and then generally it's on you guys then to start looking at that and saying, actually, how do we make that better? How do we make it so some obnoxious bugger like this guy can't come in here and ruin my day? Yeah? Because that's fundamentally what I do. I kick over the rocks. You ask me what different. I kick over rocks and see what scuttles out and actually look at how we connect that all back together. And I do that with questions. And you should be having lots of questions. So it's how are the employers going to know what to do or understand their responsibilities? Who is going to be advising them? Because it depends on who's advising them, depends on which route they go. So if that be route the awarding bodies go out, they'll be advising one thing. If training providers go out, they'll be advising another. If employers are left to talk to their accountants are going to be giving them all some random advice on how to maximise the use of their training. We're going to look at employer behaviour. Some will be adopting an income generation fee remission strategy. There's going to be an attitude towards a 10% contribution. What's an employer going to think when they actually now physically have to pay their employer contributions? How's that going to be received? Because that's going to be a key. At the moment, most of us, if we're honest, we duck that. We find a way of giving it to them free. We allocate it to benefits in kind. Now there has to be a process. If you're reading the ITT for at the moment, you have got to put down and clearly specify how you are going to collect those fees. And you're going to be in a marketplace where you might be genuinely collecting the fees and go to the employer saying 10% please, and everybody else has found a way to circumvent that. And therefore, you're not competing like for like. And that is something we're going to need to think about. A lot of employers might use it. The removal of the age grant, by the way, in July, is still theoretical. I don't know whether that is likely to happen or not. It's one of those perpetual things that's supposed to go away and never does. You're going to have that's employer issues. We're going to have practical problems. There are going to be people out of scope. Because ultimately, who's the employer? So if you've got temps, who's the employer of temporary workers? How do we get to do the training for those people? Because technically you might say, well, they're employed by an agency, and therefore that agency will actually be the employer. We sell to the agency and we can deliver to that person. We've then got to get the host employer and the agency both engaged. The irony is the agency actually doesn't employ people. Most agencies don't employ people. Umbrella organisations, payrolling organisations who do something called travel and subsistence, or claim travel and subsistence tax relief back on people's wages, they actually employ the individual, and so there's a range of payment intermediaries. How do you get to them? Who's the employer? How do we actually make that happen? Construction, self-employed. You go work for somebody like, you get into somebody like Balfour Beatty, even Railtrack, half the people there don't actually even work for the company. So it's not without its problems. When we say that they're in scope or out of scope of the levy, what does that actually mean? Who is actually in scope, who is out of scope? And these are questions that we've really got to get to the bottom of. Endpoint assessment. We've had a bit more on this today. These are my questions about it. This is, and if you're watching, these are the ones I'm going to be knocking on your door in a second about. What if they fail? Does the qualification standard register dictate the EPA organisation? What about the EPA and the legislation? So, for example, there's a lot of endpoint assessment organisations who went into ROTA, into the ROAO, the Apprenticeship Assessment Organisation register last time, And they missed it, because one of the questions is, in nowhere in any of the standards does it actually refer to the fact that the healthcare has to be a level 2 qualification on the QCF. So when you read the endpoint assessment plan, which Andy kindly puts up on the screen, nowhere in there does it say it has to be a QCF qualification underneath it. That only came out, literally, as he says, it's moving feast. This stuff changes as we go along. That came out based on the responses to people applying to be endpoint assessment organisations, because theoretically, the qualification is not, you don't need to do the qualification. It can be a completely brand new qualification. Therefore, as long as you hit the endpoint assessment, how does that work? And another thing is, what happens if your EPA fails the candidate, but your awarding body has said that the portfolio and all the work in it meets the standard. So your awarding body tells you you're very, very good, but you're using a different EPA organisation, and then the candidate fails. Lots of disconnects, lots of things where things can fall through the cracks and not actually tie up. And that's why all of us, this network is brilliant. And it's brilliant for the one fact is, in here, the man I need to talk to is sitting over there. There's somebody here that's going to talk to me about how I can actually manage my engagement process. She's sitting right there. And then there's a load of training providers that some want to be on the system, off the system, some want to be subcontractors. All that, some were going to be primes. All that connectedness, is here. And that's what makes this a really good platform now. And that's what we need to be making best use of this forum. Without qualification standards, I've picked up on most of that. Level 2 maths and English. How are we going to achieve level 2 equivalent maths if that sticks? And if it doesn't, and if it's gone, it's gone. And we've got to be delivering functional skills, or are we delivering GCSEs? Are we delivering other forms of maths? In real terms, it is an opportunity. I like change. I embrace change. That is my nature, but people don't. A bit like Steve said earlier, people don't like change. It's the unknown, it requires us to do things, we don't connect up to other people properly, so we don't manage the transition and get everything as we wanted connected. There are 2 ways that we can go. We can take the first route, which is building employer relationships, which I believe are the key to Levy. And even though we don't know what this will look like yet, the one thing that I know for absolute certainty, the person or the organisation that has the heart of the employers will win, will grow, will prosper. Because it's employer's choice. If you don't have the employer, doesn't matter how many learners you've got, if you don't have the employer, you don't have a business. And that is going to be absolutely key. You're going to need to look at how you do that. Consultative style support. So you need to get experts on this stuff because you need to help the employer get through these processes. Yeah? They need to have it explained to them. The organisation that is talking to employers and explaining them what the levy is and how to maximise its use are the ones building those relationships of trust that the employer will then go, you know what, you've been really valuable all the way through this process, I trust you now to work with me on the delivery of this process. If you're not in there doing that consultative approach and you just get expected to phone up an employer on May the 1st and say, any interest in any apprenticeships? The chances are they will have already established their relationships. Employers are critical. The other way that people will go, and for those that don't start the consultative style approach, and it could be that you're looking at added value. How are you going to get past the 10% levy? It might be that you add value through additional courses that that you provide as incentive to offset some of the additional costs. It could be that if the employer does some of their own training, you buy some of that training back. You buy some of their training as an integral part of that process. But the cash has to change hands. And then the last bit is what's going to happen for the organisations that go. They're going to adopt a low-cost model, and it's going to be a race to the bottom because everybody is going to undercut everybody. Employers are going to negotiate hard, and the result will be is that it'll be cheapest price potentially wins, unless we can sell the added value of the additionality that we do as an organisation. Put yourself in the minds of the employers. At the moment, do they differentiate between a good apprenticeship deliverer and a good apprenticeship provider and a bad apprenticeship provider? Have they got any context? Do they know you're good? Do they know you're bad? How do they know you're good? Because how do they know what others do until they try others? And this perspective means the only thing they've got is either what they experience in the lead up to this to establish your value as an organisation, or it's going to be coming down to price. And if it comes to price, everybody loses, because then what you get is a cheap price apprenticeship, it becomes low quality training because we have to do it on a budget, and therefore nobody wins. Hit the employers early, build your brand value. As Saf has said time and again, brand value is the most important thing that you can be building right now. Talk to your employers and make it happen. I appreciate I've had the sort of graveyard shift before lunch, so thank you for your attention, and I shall leave it there.